Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm going to talk to you about a historical event called the Anglo-Boer War that happened in South Africa. There were two different ones. The first one happened in 1881, and that one happened where the Boers, or the Afrikaners, they defeated the British at Majuba Hill. The British were trying to take over the two Boer republics, the Transvaal Republic and the Orange Free State, and the British were defeated at the Battle of Majuba Hill. Many people thought the British were going to win that war, but the Afrikaners pushed them back. And I like the UK, but this is a dark part of the UK's history. UK did a lot of evil things to the Boers and to the Afrikaners. And this was a dark day in the UK's history, and we need to remember this. Also, we need to remember this, though, that what happened in apartheid was disgraceful, but black South Africans have not been the only South Africans that have been oppressed, and what the British did to the Afrikaners was pretty disgraceful. But the Afrikaners won the first Boer War, and they drove the British out. They pushed the British back. Okay? But then in around 1899, the second Boer War happened, and it was the leader of England at the time was a lady named Queen Victoria. And Queen Victoria did not have Secretary of Defenses. She had Secretaries of War. And during her entire reign as Queen of England, the UK was always at war with somebody. Okay? And the British they went to war, the Afrikaners again, and they were trying to take over the Transvaal Republic and the Orange Free State. The reason they were doing that was because they wanted to, there was a lot of gold there, and the British wanted the gold in that area, and then also they had some possessions to the east of there, and then they had possessions of a lot of the rest of South Africa, and they wanted a railway to go through their area of South Africa and to connect to their seaports. And it was inexcusable what happened. I'm just laying down all the background information. And the Afrikaners fought on the Boer side. Obviously, they were Boers. But also who fought alongside the Afrikaners were volunteers from Russia as well as the United States. So volunteers from Russia and the USA helped the Afrikaners. And then on the British side, Australia and Canada and New Zealand were British colonies at the time. They fought for the British. Actually, the first part of the Second Boer War, the Afrikaners won most of the early engagements, and they had adopted guerrilla-style warfare and tactics on their horsebacks. They would go in on their horses, shoot a group of British soldiers, and then retreat. And what turned the tide with that is the Australian soldiers were really good on horsebacks, and the British started using the Australian soldiers to fight against the Afrikaners, and that was very effective. Lord Roberts was the first leader of the British soldiers in the Second Boer War, but he was quickly replaced by Lord Kitchener, and Lord Kitchener is the one who developed the British concentration camps. And Lord Kitchener developed the British concentration camps, and after the UK won the Second Boer War and they subjugated the Boer or the Afrikaner population, over 27,700 Afrikaners died in the concentration camps. And it was a sick, sadistic thing that happened. A lot of the water in the concentration camps were contaminated. The water had a lot of worms in it. Sometimes it was intentionally planted by British soldiers. Also, there was usually one latrine per concentration camp, and sometimes the concentration camps were really big concentration camps, so sometimes the latrine was 1 kilometer away from where families were staying in the tent. And diseases were rampant in the concentration camps. Typhoid was rampant. Pneumonia was rampant. Dysentery. It was just sick and sadistic. Also, right before the concentration camps developed, the British had destroyed or burned 30,000 Afrikaner farms. They either blew them up with dynamite or they burned them to the ground. Lord Kitchener developed a scorched earth policy. That the scorched earth policy is what destroyed a lot of Afrikaner land, and a lot of the Afrikaners could not return to the land after the war because the land had been burned and it wasn't fertile or efficient anymore. And that's what went on. And also, when they got into the homes, when they got into the homes, they would burn down a lot of the South African women's homes. Yes, some of the women aided some of the commandos. Some of them engaged in guerrilla warfare themselves. Some of the Afrikaner women flew the white surrender flag when they weren't surrendering. They would get close to the British soldiers and then shoot them. But at the same time, you don't laugh and joyously burn down somebody's house, and that didn't always happen. And they also killed all the livestock in those farms, and they would kill the chickens and wring the chicken's neck, and that went on. And it's a part of history that doesn't get talked about a lot. And the reason that it doesn't get talked about a lot is because the current South African government wants to make it all about apartheid. They want to make it all about how the white South Africans took a lot of black South Africans' land in 1913, and that did happen in 1913. But the Anglo-Boer War happened as well, and the Afrikaners were definitely oppressed, particularly during and immediately after the Second Boer War, when many died in concentration camps, and they were placed in some of the worst conditions in the world. That's how bad those concentration camps were. And Lord Kitchener was a devout churchgoer, always up in the church, but his actions didn't reflect that. He was not a very merciful or a very compassionate individual. He also liked china, porcelain, and flower arranging, but at the same time, he engaged in a lot of cruel, barbaric activities. So, just like I said, sick, sadistic stuff, and this was a dark day of the British history. Every country does things they're not proud of, and like I said, the UK helped save Europe from Nazism in World War II. They fought an evil Saddam regime in the first Gulf War, helped get them out of Kuwait. Particularly the book Bravo 20 is a good book, and the British SAS did a good job there. As I pointed out in the Korean War, the UK soldiers did an excellent job, but the Boer War is a scar on UK's history. And Queen Victoria was a borderline warmonger. Everywhere she went, all her years as Queen of England, there was always some kind of war going on. So the Afrikaners did win the First Boer War, and they rightfully so. I mean, the British were trying to illegally take two free republics, and the Afrikaners had a right to fight against the British and push them back, and they won the Battle of Majuba Hill and surprised a lot of people. So props to the Afrikaners for what they did in Majuba Hill. So anyways, hope everyone's doing well. Take care. God bless. And bye-bye. Bye-bye.